Hello and welcome back to the much beloved D&D journal series. No, we are not going digital for this one. I'm just giving myself a bit of a chance to put an intro in. We are continuing work on the D&D journal for my paladin Fing. I've been playing him for I think around a year now, and I'm just getting to make journal pages for his first day of meeting the party. So buckle up, friends, because we have a long way to go with this one. I don't usually do a digital mock-up for my pages, but I thought it would be easier than the physical thumbnails that I usually do, and I made 8 pages worth of journal content, which turned out to be a lot of journal content. There's a lot of drawing in this one, which caused my whole video to come out way later than I intended for it to, but I really didn't want to rush the journal videos. They're some of my favorite projects, and I love filming the reveals. They're so fun, and I just wanted it to turn out right. So jumping straight into pages 1 and 2, we have a map of the campaign setting, which I promise I was trying to go easy on myself here. I was just gonna take the map that our DM made for us, print it out, and paste it directly to the journal, and then draw Fing's journey from the northwestern kingdom of Caritania to the southeastern kingdom of Aranset. But my printer ran out of ink, so we're making some adjustments and doing this ye old-fashioned way, which honestly was very cathartic and soothing in some ways. In other ways, it made me want to absolutely rip my hair out, but that's art sometimes, baby. As always, we start with a pencil sketch before going in with the fancy ink pen. But what I should have done and keep forgetting to do is go in with the watercolor before the fancy ink pen. But you know, my brain just refuses to store up knowledge for the future in most cases. So that's going to be a repeating and probably frustrating trend to watch throughout this video. So I apologize. I don't really do a ton of map making in my spare time anymore. I used to do it like a little bit in a very haphazard way, as a 12-year-old should. I did try to revive that digitally as part of my constantly changing and ever-flowing collection of hobbies, but it's a lot. It can be a really repetitive task, and to nobody's surprise, I require a certain threshold of stimulation to really find a task interesting and worthwhile. But drawing it physically, I think, adds a certain layer of stressful permanence, I guess. I don't know, I feel like that helped, which I think is maybe a good thing. I don't know, maybe we don't think too hard about what that means about me and how I work. All in all, for not having made a ton of maps over the course of my life, I think I did a pretty snazzy job, if I do say so myself. To be fair, the general notations for natural features like mountains and forests haven't changed a whole lot. Obviously, there are a lot of small variations you can make, but at the end of the day, tree is tree. And here's where things start to get a little spooky, because this ink is so very water soluble, and this paper really loves absorbing liquids, and I am about to add watercolor to this thing, which is why I did such a nice pan before the paint, because I was low-key, high-key stressed out that I was about to ruin everything. Because of my fear of ruining everything, instead of adding a brown wash to the entire page, I just added it to the water and left the land part of the drawing unwatercolored. I noticed that as my brush got really close to the ink lines that they started to bleed a little bit, and I worked too dang hard on these little trees just to have them blur into one big blob. So a combination of -37 foresight and fear of failure led to this being the final result. Honestly, I think it still looks pretty cool like this, even if it wasn't exactly how I planned it. And I'm gonna be honest, that kind of sets the tone for how the rest of these journal pages go. To be fair, I don't think I ever truly achieve the exact vision I have when planning the thumbnails. Either I don't have the supplies that I thought I had, or I can't mix my watercolors correctly, or I just pick a whole bouquet of oopsie daisies along the way. But in a way, I think that adds to it. It's a very handmade project with a very handmade feel, and in my defense, Fing is literally 5 years old, which in kobold years is nearly a full-grown adult, but he's still 5. So this next page depicts Fing's first day in the kingdom of Aranset. After the events of his backstory, he becomes something of an anthropologist, traveling between small cities, picking up bits of culture and history, and along the way, meeting a lot of people. Sometimes he stumbled across these villages out of necessity, sometimes it was just curiosity, and sometimes it was just for fun. But he eventually finds himself being directed towards the Museum of Aranset, one of the largest centers dedicated to preserving relics and discovering ancient cultures. There is where he meets the archivist Fiora. I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember if archivist Fiora is a fire Jinni or a fire Genasi, and I took a lot of super conflicting notes in my actual D&D note-taking journal. And to be even more honest, I have no idea how the DM envisioned her, but I definitely had a very specific picture of her in my mind, so who cares about inconsistencies? I'm drawing characters, and at least this time I remembered that you need to watercolor first and then draw with ink second, so good job me. And this is my favorite thing about this journal in comparison to my last journal. Fing is a much more lighthearted character than in Kashti, and I mean not really more lighthearted in terms of backstory, but significantly more lighthearted in terms of vibe. He uses a lot more color, he keeps a lot more pressed flowers. In Kashti had to be a lot more practical in terms of what she was carrying. Fing loves picking up little trinkets and items and ticket stubs and receipts and candy wrappers. Fing 100% is a junk journal guy, and this campaign has a much more steampunk setting with a lot of unique magic relics and technology, so if there are hints of more modern imagery or words in the washi tape or stickers that I add to this journal, it works a lot better with this campaign setting. And I absolutely loved this little color swatch page that I had in my scrap paper. It has all these varying shades of red and orange, and I think it matched super well with this fiery character. Our next page is a complimentary one to the Fiora page. It's supposed to be the street view of the museum or maybe a nearby alleyway. I just wanted to give a sense of the scale and vibe of Aranset. Aranset is one of the larger cities in the kingdom with closely built stone buildings and a lot of cool architecture. As always, I like to be perfectly transparent. I use references for my architectural drawings. Sometimes they're real places, sometimes they're other people's art. This one in particular, I think, is a place in Germany. I could be wrong, but either way, I'm not super confident in my architectural drawings, so we love a lovely drawing from reference, and it's good practice for me if I'm going to get any better at landscapes ever in my life. For this one, everyone can continue to say good job to me because I did remember watercolor goes first. Also, yes, you can see I'm switching between rooms. I'm going between my computer work desk and my sewing room desk, so I apologize for the lighting and scenery inconsistencies. I'm using my big computer screen to look at references and then moving to my craft room where all my little papers and stickers and paints are all kept. And also, it's nice to sit in the light of the rainbow because it makes me feel better about life in general. And it also makes it hard to see what colors I'm working with. Also, hey guys, this is your friendly reminder that you can in fact iron paper, especially paper that's warped due to watercolors. Just be so careful about it, work very quickly and not on a super high heat setting. Also make sure you're not accidentally ironing something sticky or melty or toxic. But with our paper fully dried and ironed nice and flat, and surprise, a blue sky also added, we can begin the line art process. I think of the watercolor paintings I did in this project, this one maybe was my least favorite, although there's another one that's a pretty strong contender. Don't get me wrong, it's still very pretty, but I wish I had done more colors or maybe more shading in the watercolor. It's a very gray overall painting, and I think I was afraid that I was going to make it too dark and ominous looking. It was already a little more sad looking than I had originally envisioned it to be, which is why I ended up painting in the sky at the last minute. But again, very pretty addition at the end of the day. Alright, so on to the next couple of pages. This was the spread that took way longer than I thought it would. I mean, I knew it would take a long time. It was just a lot. This is still on the first day of Fing meeting his party. They end up going to a festival convention sort of thing. They're in the Aranset Square and they're showing off the latest inventions of the esteemed engineers of Aranset, including cannons and these super cool steampunk crab-shaped submersibles of varying sizes. At the end of the product show, they have a strength pushing competition between the crab submersible and anyone who wants to challenge it. So of course, Fing takes up the challenge. And it was a very hard fought battle. The rolls were up and down and up again, but in the end, Fing prevailed, winning both a tiny version of the gem that is used to power the machine and a trip in the submersible with his party the next morning. So you know I had to draw a big ol' steampunk crab submersible, which is both up my alley and not not up my alley at all. I mean, I don't really draw a lot of mechs or machines or animals or sea creatures. Like, I literally had to look up a picture of a crab just to confirm that they have the number of legs that I thought they have. But I had so much fun drawing and painting this. It's not even funny. I know copper is definitely not the ideal material to be going into the very salty ocean, but it just looks so cool in this color palette. I simply had to. Also, I know it looks like I'm having a very normal time painting, just being a very chill guy, but you can't see my face. I am in shambles listening to Critical Role Downfall. Y'all, I thought I was ready. I'm so behind. I've seen so many spoilers, but I was not ready. Also, please, on that note, please don't come for me or to me with spoilers because I am not caught up yet. I am so close to being caught up though. I think I have less than 20 episodes left of campaign 3, and working on this project made a huge dent in me being behind. Also, we can say good job for me continuing to remember that I need to paint first and ink line second, but say it like a little less loudly than you did last time because I'm losing the thread. I do paint first, and then I kind of got a little impatient to get to the inking phase, and so we have still a little bit of bleeding going on, and then I proceeded to add a little more paint after the fact, so it's kind of messy. But in my defense, it was getting really late when I was working on this, and because it was getting kind of late and I was getting kind of overwhelmed with the process, I slightly overcooked this page. I added a bunch of stickers and ticket stubs and papers because I had a bunch of cool newspapery bits and papers with machine patents on them, and I thought that would suit the vibe, and it does, but it ended up being really cluttered and overwhelming. I actually ended up being so careful and pulling off all of the papers that I could, only keeping the stuff that I couldn't confidently take off without destroying the pages. But the page was not the only thing I overcooked. I also overcooked my brain because I didn't realize I ran out of space on my SD card. So there is like no footage of me trying to preserve the white space and also pasting the giant crab on. But hey, here's the next day. Ta-da! Our beautiful mechanical crab. Because I had to redo this page, I happened to get my gold sparkly iridescent stickers in the mail. They're a little less divine energy and a little more magic girl core than I had hoped that they would be. But honestly, Fing is kind of magic girl coded anyways. They're very into the power of friendship, so I think it suits him very well. Alright, so this page, no good job. Nobody tell me good job, or a very teeny tiny good job, because I completely forgot everything that I had learned about painting before inking from the previous 2 days. Probably because if you look inside my head, there is most likely no brain in there. It's just like a glass bowl with a single goldfish swimming around it. So this page takes place the day after the festival, when the party goes out to the docks to prepare for the ride in the very cool crab submersible. And there we met one of the lead inventors / engineers that worked on the project, and his apprentice Digby, the twins Prince Aldwin and Princess Aldrada, and the chief advisor to the Emperor Dunstan. Now, Chief Advisor Dunstan was presented to us as an overall disagreeable guy who is hiding a lot of secrets. Very much the super nasty, horrible, evil-looking advisor that the king blindly trusts for some reason, and it makes you want to scream. So, I have 2 theories about Mr. Dunstan. My first theory is that he is exactly what we think he is. Something has happened to the Emperor, and this Dunstan guy has been pulling the strings, trying to gain power and influence. Or, alternatively, he's the reddest of red herrings, and he's actually just a guy trying to do his best, and he's grumpy because everything is in shambles. And I just want to point out that I really like how my imagined portrait of Dunstan came out, even though I did paint after I put down the ink. I think he looks cool, and I think I did a great job. Thank you very much. In hindsight, I absolutely did not need to make this page at all, and I'm not saying this in a way that I dislike this page, but when I was writing down information, I realized that I have so many sessions of Fing's D&D campaign that I need to make a journal page for. This page and the next page could have maybe been condensed into a single page, just to conserve a little bit of space in this book. Not that I don't want to make a page for every little tiny detail, but also I spread out the events of like a day and a half over 6 pages, and I'm not sure if I can afford to be doing that in terms of time and materials, but you know what? So far so good, so far so fun, and that is the whole point of this anyways. Which brings us to the last page, which I had a vision for, and it didn't pan out how I planned. As per the theme, I had a vision but not a plan, and I full sent a couple of things that I maybe should have been a wee bit more careful about. But before I dive too quickly into my regrets, as I so often do, let me set the stage for what this page is. In our little sea adventure excursion, we came across some city ruins, very Atlantis vibes, at which point Digby the intern got really nervous and said that he was specifically instructed by Dunstan not to bring the submersible any deeper into the bay, to which the rest of the party obviously said, "That's suspicious," and went out for our own little snorkeling adventure to go see what was up with that. We ended up finding a lot more ancient city ruins and some really cool rare prismatic stones, but we also found what looked like the aftermath of a really unfair battle. As historians would, we studied the skeletons of the victims of the battles, and we found that they were strangely thin with elongated and wide rib cages with very few rib bones, as well as sharp pointed teeth. And they were wearing this bronze scale mail sort of armor. We did our best not to disturb the site, but we did take a few of those iridescent stones and one armband with unique engravings on it, just to see if we could find any correlation with any of the historical artifacts or documents that we have access to in the museum. So, to get the sea vibe on the journal page, of course I started with a base of blue and green across the whole page, before drawing in my skeleton, which I painted in with a white heavy body acrylic paint because it was the most opaque paint that I had on hand. And then I lined it all with fancy ink. And then I painted it again because it wasn't opaque enough, and I smudged some of the ink lines, and I just continue to get more horrible as this video progresses. Much like the Crahb and Dunstan drawings, I drew the shiny stone and the armband on a separate piece of paper and then cut them out so that the page has, I guess, more texture and the special items feel a little more emphasized and defined. I really like how the armband came out. I did smudge it a little bit, but I kept messing with the prismatic stone and the watercolors dried a lot darker than I thought they would. And the next day in natural light, I had the thought that it low-key looks like a red onion, and now I can't unsee it. I also wrote down little notes of all the things we found about the skeleton, just filling up all the blank space because that's what you do. And then I remembered that I intended to paint in with white acrylic paint those like water light reflection lines. You know what I mean, just to make the whole scene look more underwater. And now that I put the text in, I couldn't do that without covering up all my hard work. So in the end, I just decided not to do it and instead drew a bunch of little shells and starfish to really try and heavily imply that this guy is embedded into the sea floor. And that's why I didn't draw a full anatomically correct skeleton, and there wasn't any other reason for not drawing a skeleton. Not because I didn't want to or anything like that. But that brings us to the end of the crafting part, so I think it's time to go on to the reveal. It has been far too long since I worked on journal pages. I went from struggling to figure out how I would stretch out a few sessions into enough journal pages to having way more D&D notes than I know what to do with that are all in desperate need of organization. So the plan is to do a D&D journal video at least once a month for every third video of the month. If you want to stick around for that, I would greatly appreciate that. We are really close to 2,000 subscribers, which I am very grateful for and cannot even comprehend. And if all goes as planned, next journal video will be following up on Fing's party getting a special request from the Emperor himself and the beginning of the real adventure. So that'll be back on this channel in about a month. Hopefully. But as always, who knows? Not me.